Welcome to an episode of Social Ethics in the realm of the Art of Total Living. Today we have with us the author of The Art of Total Living, Mr. Silvano Burrusa himself, and we are going to be discussing the topic of usury. So over to you, Silvano. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you to you.
So the first
We can
question,
start. Yes, go ahead.
the first question which comes to mind is, what is economics? Because usury falls under economics, and it's important
Yes,
to understand
absolutely.
economics.
Yes. All right. Economics has got to be understood well because we are in the presence of two sciences, not one. Economics is two sciences. They do not clash against each other. They are complementary to one another. One goes together with the other, but they are different. Why are they different? Let's define economics. It is the science of production and distribution of wealth. Obviously, now we have to define wealth. What is wealth? Wealth is basically services. You can produce wealth only by working. And by working, you produce a service directly from person to person, such as, for instance, teaching or counseling or giving legal advice, any of these things. Or you can incorporate your service into an object which you call a good. So the production of goods and services is what economics produces. The production of wealth is the first type of economics. What do you need to produce wealth? You need only two things. You need land under your feet and work. And work. By working, you transform the environment and make it to produce a service for yourself or for anyone else. But that is the first part of economics. The production of wealth, the factors of the production of wealth are two, land and work. Let's keep this in mind because this is vital. Now we have to distribute that wealth. Between what? Between the same factors of production, land and work. But you cannot call them now land and work. The distribution of wealth to work is known as wages. You reward work with wages. And what that of land? That of land is called rent. The rent of land increases when people work. How does it increase? Very simple, in the value of land. The more people work, the more the rent of land increases. We are going to the details later. At the moment, let's concentrate on this. We have not mentioned money. Have you noticed that?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Let's ask, is it possible to have an economy without money?
I don't think so. Well, let's say if you run it on a barter system, you could do it. But you'd very soon hit the limitations of a barter system.
Let's not talk about barter. Let's talk about the production and distribution of wealth, which is what we have just talked about. Is it possible to do that without money? Well, I can anticipate you the answer. It is not only possible, it's been done every day. In Kenya, in North Kenya, which you take together with the northern Uganda, with the southern Sudan, and with the western Somalia, there is a population, maybe 100,000, 200,000 people with 9 million cattle. They don't use money. Why? Simply because all produce the same thing. They produce cattle. Cattle reproduces itself. So the means of exchange they have is cattle. As a matter of fact, in Latin, cattle is called pecus, hence the word pecuniary, pecunia. Pecunia means cattle.
Wow.
It's is the primeval medium of exchange, cattle. So they have large cattle side cows and medium goats and more small sheep, but they all do that. Now, since they all do the same thing, they all rear cattle, there is no barter. They don't need the money. If they need to exchange something, they exchange precisely a certain number of cattle for certain others of a given size against another size, and that's it. You don't need any more.
But why is this so significant? Why is it important to have this context when we're discussing money? The whole context of being able to exchange goods and services without money and economics.
A good question. It is because most people confuse confuse economics with the chrematistics, which is the art of becoming rich by manipulating money. I'll give an example which I came across only a few days ago. I have a Reader's Digest. It's an Italian one called, well, it doesn't matter how it is called. And before analyzing country by country, it analyzes the world as a whole. And there is a section called the economy. What is the first section of the economy? Financial markets. I was startled when I saw this. The financial markets have nothing, but as I repeat, nothing to do with economics. The financial markets have to do with the chrematistics. Chrematistics is the art of becoming rich by interest, not by working. Work is alien from money manipulation, and therefore this article, the financial markets, should not belong there. It should something else, completely different. We shall come back to this. But let's finish the question of economics first.
Yes.
So when you distribute wealth, you distribute between land and work as rent and wages. So rent, wages, and work are the factors of production. There is nothing else. All right.
What about land?
What is the problem here? Why did I say there are two sciences and not one?
I have a question. Sorry to interject.
Okay, go ahead.
You just said that the factors of production are rent, wages, and work.
No, the factor of production, sorry. The factors of production are land and work.
Land and work, thank you.
The factors of distribution are rent and wages.
Okay, all right.
That clear?
Yes.
That is clear. Okay. Why do I say that two are different? This is something that is not so obvious, but it was pointed out by Henry George 125 years ago, 1.25 century ago. The reason is that whereas the production of wealth is a physical phenomenon, so you need is to have land under your feet and work. The distribution of wealth is a moral phenomenon. Here we have moral, i.e. human decisions. So there are a large number of ways in which you can distribute wealth, in which you can control rent and wages. The chief of all should be, it is in fact taxation. By taxation, you distribute wealth. It's quite obvious that taxation has no other function, has not only that function. But here we come into a further point. Is there such thing as just taxation? Do you think?
I think so, yes.
Where is it? Have you ever found this concept in any book of economics?
Well, it makes sense if they're shared services or services.
Of course, yes. Yes, it makes sense, but is it there? Is any book on taxation speak about justice, mentioning even the word? That's all. That's it. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Precisely. That is the point. That is the point. The taxation we are under the world over is perverse. And I don't hesitate to use that word, perverse. Why? Because it punishes those who work and rewards those who don't work. And that's why we have the gap between the rich and the poor. Who are the rich? The rich are those who make money but without working. Who are the poor? Those who work without making money. Now, I'm not original in saying this, try to understand that. This was said by no lesser people than Leo Tolstoy more than 100 years ago. He said that, he noticed it, he published it, and it's one thing that unless somebody points it out to you, you do not notice it. This is why we are in trouble in all this matter. We do not have justice in distributing the wealth produced by work. Just we don't have it. So what happens? That the tax base of most countries is value added by work. Where do they get taxes from? From wages. But they have to reduce wages to do that, which in some countries is dramatic. But in Kenya is, I don't know, maybe 20%. Or in Italy, the wage percentage of taxation is 70%, 70, meaning taxation impoverishes people day after day after day. Why? Because the tax base is value added by work. This is unjust. What should be a just tax base? It's value subtracted from public use, mainly from land. Okay? Was this ever done in the entire history of economics? It was done. And it was done by the man I was talking to you about when we spoke here. Do you remember his name?
No. Oh, Muamar Gaddafi?
Muamar Guadaffi. He was the only statesman last century and the beginning of this century who understood that just taxation is taxing value subtracted from public use.
Why is this just taxation? Why is it just? And okay, I understand why the other form is.
Okay, correct. Yeah, you are right. Let's define justice.
Yes.
Let's define justice. Of course, you are right. Well, justice was defined not yesterday, but almost 2,000 years ago. And the Roman jurist who defined justice in the 1st century AD was called Ulpian, U-L-P-A-I-N, Ulpianus. Ulpian defined justice as the constant will to give everyone his due. Okay, that definition is also important to be understood correctly, because if that is just, if it is just to give everyone his due, it is unjust not only not to give what is due, but also to give what is not due. These two extremes, you remember from the classes of ethics, these two extremes are the two vices that are at the extreme of the virtue. The virtue of justice is in the middle. The two vices are at the extremities. One, not to give what is due. Two, to give what is not due. So if you then tax value added by human exertion, by human work, you penalize those who work. You force them to hand out some of their wages to the state, to the tax department. This is theft. In plain English, is theft. Or better, no, it's not theft, it's robbery. Robbery because the state has an armed arm. I mean, it is armed and you are not. So you get it then.
Yes, yes.
The taxation the taxation in which we live is perverse. What did the Gaddafi do? Gaddafi nationalized three things. One, money. He set up a public bank which would issue money as needed by the people of Libya and by the economics of the country and by infrastructure and by everything else. With this money issued by the Bank of Libya, the public bank, he built the great man-made river. which the mainstream press in the West keeps absolutely mum about. What is this great man-made river? It's a pipe, it's a water pipe, it's an aqueduct, The length of this aqueduct is 6,000 kilometers. Do you realize how big is that? That's 1 octave the circumference of the Earth. So we have an aqueduct of 6,000 kilometers bringing water from the depths of the Nubian sandstone in the east of Libya to the coast in a complex network of pipes with a diameter of 4 meters each. He financed this 100% domestically. He did not borrow money from anyone. He built a factory that produced this pipe in concrete, and he arrived to the coast after 25 years of work. So the work started in 1986 and finished in 2011. Then the NATO thought itself to be a duty to go and bomb this aqueduct. And they bombed the factory that produced the pipes and the center of distribution, which is a war crime as defined by the Geneva Convention, but of course NATO is above the Geneva Convention as far as I can see. But again, that is another problem. The mechanics of Libya taxation in 2011 were such that this bank was able to give money according to the wealth raised by the country. For instance, if a baby was born, the National Bank gave this baby $5,000 equivalent of a bonus, of a gift. To do what? To match the wealth represented by the baby. A baby is not only a mouth that eats, it's also a future pair of hands that work, is a future head that thinks, and that is how the Libya National Bank rewarded the birth of a baby. If two people, if a man and a woman wanted to marry in Libya, the state gave them, this bank gave them an interest-free loan of $50,000, the equivalent, to be repaid, I don't know in how long, but that was an interest-free loan. This is what the control of money by part of the state can do. Why cannot this be done in other countries? Because money is not in the hands of the politics. It's in the hands of the banking system. The banks issue money according to their criteria, not to the needs of the people or of the state or of the common good or any of these things. And thus we are in trouble.
Can I just stop you there for 1 second? I'm just trying again, and I don't know if you can help me to see the golden thread, because first we started by trying to explain what economics is, and we said that economics is the study of what produces wealth, and there are two things that produce wealth. Number one is the factors of production, which are land and work.
No. What produces wealth is two factors: land and work.
And then what distributes that wealth is
exactly. Okay. No, you're right.
So
one thing that distributes wealth is taxation, but it's not the only one. Corruption also distributes wealth. Corruption distributes wealth. Theft distributes wealth. Embezzlement distributes wealth. There are hundreds of ways of distributing wealth, legal and illegally. Taxation should be legal. Should be legal, and effectively, if it was just, taxation would be right. I was telling you Gaddafi, because Gaddafi is the only one who had a just legal taxation system. And he was doing all these things because he would distribute wealth by nationalizing three things. The first we have seen: money issuing is a public duty. Why? Because it is the state's right to receive taxes. To every right there corresponds a duty. The state has the duty to issue means of payment. But at the moment, in the so-called West and in Africa also, doesn't do that. Doesn't do that. What happens there? The state borrows. From whom? From the banks. And then it charges the people with taxation to pay interest on that loan. This is the only adjective I can say is perverse. It's perverse because the state, that is the political power, is subdued, is submitted, is slave to the money power. That is unjust. That is wrong.
All right. So the context of this conversation around taxation is that taxation represents another way in which wealth can be distributed over and above
the main way.
Wages.
Taxation represents the main way by which wealth ought to be distributed.
Okay.
Ought to be distributed. Now, one of the ways, as I told you, of the distribution that Gaddafi applied was public money. Money is public, issued by the public powers, and charges no interest, because it's not manipulating money. It's creating money at the same rate as the wealth produced by work in the country. We have not finished. The other thing that Gaddafi did, the rent of land, i.e. the value of the land of the country, which increases simply by working, what Gaddafi did is he nationalized it. So he abolished, destroying physically by fire all title deeds that were in Libya during the Italian colonialist period, 1911, 1951. In 1979, so now what, 41 years ago, Gaddafi abolished and destroyed all title deeds, so that the land belongs now to the nation, not to the state as it was in the Soviet Union, to the nation, meaning the rent can be now monetized to pay for social services. And that's what Gaddafi did. He monetized the rent. With that monetization of the rent, he was able to give free electricity, free education, free health, free land, and free water to the people of Libya.
Sorry.
Without taxing them.
Sorry.
Without taxing them.
There's something I don't quite understand what you mean when you say the monetization of rent.
Monetizing the rent. It means simply calculate how much the rent has increased by the work of the people. So how much more valuable is the land today than it was, say, a year ago. And that surplus, you turn it into currency and give pay the salaries of the people who are in charge of the offices, those in charge of education, so salaries of teachers, headmasters, etc. The salary of those who are distributing water, so those who work in the aqueduct, you pay for the work of people who have to do the distribution. That is what monetizing the rent means.
So
let
me get this straight. Let me just try and explain it the way I've understood it. So in 1979, Gaddafi destroys, or it was 1951 or 1979, he destroys all the 79. He destroys all the title deeds. The land then becomes the property of the state.
No, becomes the property of the nation. The nation and the state are not the same thing. The nation is the people.
Okay.
But the nation is the people. The state is the apparatus that is necessary to govern the people.
All right.
So how do you give this to the people? You monetize the rent. So you turn it into money, which you issue from the public bank, and you pay the salaries of those who work at the offices where wealth is distributed, i.e. in education, in health, in electricity, in the bank itself. You get the idea?
So let me get this. Let me try and understand the steps. Let's say it's 1978. I'm in Libya. I own 1 acre of land, and I'm paying rent. Yeah. I'm paying $1 a month for that 1 acre of land to someone. You know, maybe I've got a house there or whatever. No. So I'm paying it to someone. 1979. Yeah. I'm still paying $1, but this time that $1 is not going to the person who I used to pay in 1978, but is now going towards paying civil servants, towards paying teachers, police officers, etc., etc.
I understand your question. Now, the problem here is language, and not economic at all. The problem here that the word rent in English means two things. Okay, what we're talking about is one meaning is the rent you pay for occupying land, for hiring something or other, etc. The rent I'm talking about is completely different from this. Unfortunately, the name is the same. And here rent means the value of the land as a whole. I'll give you another example to make it understand this better. There are two men who these centuries have been very vocal and very active in bringing out this issue of rent. One of them died a year ago or 2 years ago. His name was Fred Harrison, British. The other is still alive. In fact, I have corresponded with him on very few occasions. His name is Mason Gaffney. He is American, lives in California. To get an idea of their research, there's a book called After Brexit. I can show it to you. I have it here. You see it? Yes. Beyond Brexit, the blueprint. Look at the name of the authors. They are Fred Harrison, Mason Gaffney.
Yes.
You see them? Yes. Okay. Yes. Now, in this book, they calculated the rent of the United Kingdom for 2016. This is the rent in the sense I need. That is the amount, the increase in value of the land of the United Kingdom as a whole. The figure is 493 billion pounds, practically half a trillion. Where did this money go? Where did this money go? It went only in private pockets. Not £1 went into the public revenue. That is the difference between the UK and Gaddafi.
I see.
Can you see now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. If we want to add some historical background to this, how did this happen? Oh, this is a story that is 400 years long. It happened when the British, or rather the English, what you call the lords, the nobility, bought from Henry VIII, King of England, in from 1541 onwards, bought land that the king had confiscated from the Catholic Church in the 3 years, 1536, 1539. That land was run for centuries by 900 monasteries and 10,000 monks. Because the amount of the income was huge. So there was more than enough to pay not only for the social services, which the church took was manning. For instance, hospitals, for instance, schools, for instance, universities, for instance, hostelry for pilgrims were free of charge, etc., etc. There was more than enough to pay also for the benefices of the clergy, mainly priests and bishops. So priests and bishops pocketed the rent of land. Okay. Naturally enough, the abuses were immense, and I'm not going to spell them out, but I could in another video. But there was enough for both. When the King Henry VIII confiscated his land, he did not understand economics, and I don't blame him, because in those days it was very difficult to understand economics. But instead of getting the rent into the exchequer, into the public revenue, he sold the land to the landlords. That was a fatal mistake from which England has never recovered in 400 years. So what happens now is that all that rent, £500 billion in a year, goes to private pockets. Now, how do we know this? I don't know how Harrison and Gaffney did it, but I know, or better, I don't know, what algorithm they used to calculate that rent. All I know is that in no university course of economics, this is taught. Nowhere. So people don't know. People don't know. And what was it? Yes. When the landlord and the lords became then landlords, what they did was the immediate thing, they stopped the social services. So that's when pauperism began in England and has never disappeared to this day. The poor people did not exist because the church was providing for them. But now, ever since the landlords owned this land, they stopped all the social services and they simply pocketed the rest. Every now and then, in the English papers, there is an obituary. And in 2018, for instance, the Duke of Westminster died. And he left a legacy, an estate of £8 billion. Ask yourself, where did that money come from? From that rent. From that rent. So whenever one of these great peers that dies, he leaves immense amounts of money, which in justice should have gone to the exchequer, but they did not. And the number of people, poor people in Britain, has increased ever since King Henry VIII, at least to the century before last, if not perhaps even now. I'll tell you a story. In 1864, so this is now 56 years ago, Professor Edwin Thorold Rogers of the University of Oxford wrote a history of English economy, and he proved with the figures that the poor of England, that every king of England, from Henry VIII to Queen Victoria, so across 4 centuries, had left the country at their death poorer than it was than when they found it at their accession to the throne. Every king of England. And you know what happened? What happened was that Professor Thorold Rogers was expelled from Oxford. That's what happened. You see?
Yeah.
So that is could be the subject for another video to speak about the rent of land and the land question. At the moment, this is the gist. This is the gist. There is a third thing that Gaddafi did, and I did not mention. He nationalized, or rather, he taxed the extraction of oil, and he taxed it at 35%. So the foreign oil companies that extracted oil were licensed to extract it, but not to sell it to whoever they wanted. They had to pay 35% of their income from selling the oil to Libya. With that, Libya had a level of taxation ridiculously low. I don't think there was even income tax there because you don't need it to. You did not need to. And the people lived, a very decent life. If anyone in Libya wanted to go to study abroad because the local university would not offer that particular course, the state paid for them everything. Everything. Where did they get from? From the rent of land. Where did they get from? From the from the rent of land or from the revenue from oil. It's one of the two. But to pay for infrastructure, Gaddafi did not tax anybody. He simply issued the money into the infrastructures, which is what any state could do if politics had the edge over money manipulation. At the moment, politics is at the beck and call of finance. Finance rules everything. So politics rules nothing.
So how does that arrangement differ in a communist country?
It differs because in a communist country, the owner of the land is the state. So you are not given the land in use and you do what you like with it. You have to do what the state tells you. And that's what used to happen. So that in the Soviet Union, land was not only nationalized, was collectivized. In fact, it was statalized, not nationalized, statalized and collectivized. You had to work on it as the state told you, not as you wished. And in fact, at the time, many people had a small piece of land, but a few square meters around their houses. The food production in the Soviet Union was greater in this private piece of land than it was in the collectivized farms. Why? No one wants to work for the state. So that is the difference. Difference that in the Soviet Union, the state owned the land. In Gaddafi's system, no one owned the land. People used the land, but could not buy and sell it. The same thing happened in Zambia. President Kaunda, who is still alive, by the way, I think he's 96 now, abolished all title deeds, in fact, before Gaddafi, in 1975. And in Zambia, I've been there 3 times, I've seen the place. It's a completely different panorama from Kenya. To begin with, not a single drop of blood has been spilled in 40 years over land issues. In Kenya, the blood shedding for issues is, if not daily, at least weekly. I can see it every day in the newspaper, right? So that's the main thing. But not only that, in Zambia, parking is free, day or night, anywhere in the city. Why? Because there is plenty of land. So the land has been allotted for public use. You don't pay anything for parking a car anywhere. The only buildings with more than 1 story are the public buildings in the center of Lusaka. All private houses are maximum 1, 2 stories. There are no skyscrapers, private skyscrapers. Why? Because there is no land problem. There is land for everyone. You simply rent land from whom? From the office of the president. From the office of the president. You rent whatever it is, you negotiate it, and then you use it for as long as you need it and for what you need it. when you stop using it, either because you die, and then your successor have the right of inheritance of the same piece of land, they keep it. If they are not interested, they change, and somebody else occupies that land. That's how it works.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yes. I
Let's
get
continue then.
that and communism. Yes.
There's not communism. See, the difference is vital, because you still have the power of decision. You still do what you want to do, etc. Let's continue with economics. So in northern Kenya and Somalia, etc., we have the pastoralists who have an economy without money. What does a pastoralist do if he wants to buy an AK-47? 2 cows. I asked this to a local who lives there, so I know it firsthand. Okay, the price of an AK-47 is 2 cows. Period. What does he use the AK-47 for? To protect other people and to protect his herd from other people for pastures. Why? Because by increasing numbers, now the fight, the struggle is over pastures. Obviously not. Okay? Is there any way of solving this problem? There is. I have proposed it to a number of people, but for some reason it doesn't quite get it. What can be done? First of all, you tax these people in cattle. You don't tax them in money. Tax them in cattle. And they listen to reason if you do that. But second of all, there is another thing you can do. But this is something that has to do with health. So I think we better leave it to another video. Let's finish the thing here. I want to complete. If there is an economy without money, can there be money without an economy?
Can there be money without an economy?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, it depends on what you define that money as or where you source it from. But if you use it as a store of wealth, then it can exist. Let's say you're using gold coins. You can.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. You're right. If you use the store of value, you can. But if you use a means of exchange, it's useless. As a matter of fact, such a thing did historically happen. And I will tell you the story now. In 1914, as you may remember, the First World War broke out in Europe. At the time, Tanganyika, today Tanzania, was a German colony. You may remember this, do you?
Yes.
Tanganyika was a German colony. But German colony hemmed in from enemy territory. Kenya in the north, Mozambique in the south, and then the Congo in the west. So they were all enemies of Germany. So the governor of Tanganyika, of Tanganyika, right, whose name was Schnee, Herr von Schnee, said, look, let sleeping dogs lie. We are not interested in starting a war in Africa. First, because the Africans have no interest whatsoever in this war. And second, because our armed forces in Tanganyika, we have 200 non-commissioned officers, German, and an army of 4,000 Askari, all African. They're not going to for us. And therefore, let's stop. Let's not do anything. But the general that was in charge of the army was a real strategist by the name of Paul von Lettow. Von Lettow went to the governor and said, sir, says, we have to attack the British. Attack the British? You must be mad. No, sir, he said, I'm not mad. We don't want to defeat them in field battles because we cannot. But we can keep them on the run. And we can force them to subtract troops from Europe and send them to Africa, where we can keep them on the run as long as we want. And the governor said, okay, let's do that. And that was the saga, the epic story of the German army in Africa. For 4 years, the whole duration of the war, an army, a ragtag army of 4,000 men, which then were reduced to 1,000, kept at bay an army of 250,000 men from British sources. They, every now and then, was a guerrilla tactic. So every now and then they exchanged fire, but then the Germans and the Askari disappeared into the bush and were never seen again. In fact, there are several books about this, which are hilarious, but also very, very, very interesting. Now, the story, however, is not that. Is that when we left Dar es Salaam for the bush, the governor insisted in carrying with the Askaris something like 6 or 7 cases full of German paper currency. You get the idea. And then for Leto, he said, sir, this is pure folly. No one is going to accept this money in payment for anything. But for the emperor, the governor said, no, money has intrinsic value. It's a superstition. So we have to carry that money. And Folletto said, one good day, I will set this money on fire with my own hands. And he did, because after 2 years, that money was making porters sweat, but nothing else. So they all heaped it up under a tree, and Folletto set it on fire with his own hands, i.e., an economy without money, money without economy cannot exist. So this is historical, this is happening. Okay, now I've finished about economics, unless you have other questions to ask.
Okay, I think we can stop there for today. Thank you very much. I think it was a good introduction to economics, and I think because we've spoken so much about money as a as a store of value and means of exchange, I think that will be a good topic for our next conversation.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do that for the next one.
All right. Thank you very much for this time with us, and
for me it's an absolute pleasure to converse with intelligent people. Far more than watching movies or seeing TV, which I have not done for decades.
All right. Thank you very much, Subhano.
Okay.
Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.